The storm came without warning. The red sky above the barren world split with cracks of light that did not look like normal lightning. They twisted like burning branches crawling across the dark horizon. The wind howled against the hills and dust blew hard enough to bite into skin. Ethan sat inside his small outpost cabin, far from the main colony. He lived alone on this edge of the frontier, a place most men would call empty. To him it was peaceful. He liked the silence, the long days of work and the wide sky at night. But tonight the silence was broken. He heard a sound through the storm. At first he thought it was just the wind, but then it came again, sharp, faint, almost like a cry. Ethan froze. He did not expect visitors. Nobody traveled this far in weather like this. He reached for his old rifle, more out of habit than fear, and opened the door. The storm pushed against him, filling the doorway with a swirl of dust and heat. He stepped out, eyes squinting, and listened. There it was again. A voice weak and broken. He followed the sound down the slope near his cabin. The sand shifted under his boots and the wind made every step heavy. Then he saw a shape in the dirt. A figure collapsed on the ground, barely moving. It was not human. The skin of the stranger glowed faintly in the stormlight, pale silver with faint blue veins like shining rivers. The head was smooth, the eyes too large, the body thin as bone. An alien woman. She tried to rise but could not. Her hand shook as she reached out, then fell back into the dust. Ethan felt his heart pound. He had seen aliens before, but never this close, and never one alone like this. "Help," she whispered in broken common. The voice cracked, soft as a child's. "Please, help." Ethan looked around the storm. No one else. No hunters, no ship, no sign of others. Just her. For a moment he thought about leaving. She was not his problem. The colony always warned about contact with exiles and strays. They carried trouble. Some carried disease. Others carried war. But when he looked down at her eyes wide with fear, he could not walk away. He bent low, pulling her arm over his shoulder. She was light, too light, as if she had not eaten for days. With effort, he carried her back toward the cabin, each step a fight against the raging wind. Inside, he set her on the bed. Her skin was cold, her breath shallow. She curled tight, whispering words he did not understand. Ethan poured water into a cup and held it to her lips. She drank greedily, trembling with every swallow. When she finally lay back, her eyes opened again. "I am Sarah," she said slowly, as if testing the words. "Baron cast out," Ethan frowned. He had heard stories about alien tribes on distant worlds, tribes with harsh laws and strange traditions. He remembered one tale told by a passing trader. Barren women, unable to bear children, were thrown away by their people, left to die in the wilds. If that story was true, then Sarah was one of them. "You were left out there to die?" he asked. She closed her eyes and nodded once. The fire in the stove crackled. Outside, the storm roared louder, pressing against the cabin walls. Ethan studied her, uneasy. Her skin had marks burned into it, symbols perhaps, scar brands from her people. They looked cruel, deep enough to scar forever. Something about the sight made him angry. "You'll stay here tonight," he said finally. "But when the storm clears, you'll need to tell me more. I need to know why you came this far." Her eyes opened again, and for the first time he saw a flicker of something strange. Not just fear, not just pain. Something hidden, something sharp, like a secret locked behind her gaze. She said nothing, only stared at him until he looked away. Ethan tried to rest, but his mind would not calm. Who was she really? Why had she found her way to him of all people? And why did he feel that bringing her inside was more dangerous than leaving her outside? As he drifted into uneasy sleep, the storm began to change. The red lightning outside no longer cracked at random. It seemed to move in patterns, crossing the sky like written lines. Ethan could not see it, but if he had, he might have noticed the shapes looked like symbols, like the marks burned into Sarah's skin. And in the shadows beyond the hills, other shapes moved. Tall, thin, watching the small cabin with cold eyes. Inside, the alien woman lay awake, her lips moving soundlessly. Her hands traced invisible lines against the blanket. The storm outside was not just weather, it was a signal. And Ethan, without knowing it, had just invited the storm into his home. The storm faded by morning. The red sky cleared, leaving the desert world silent again. Dust lay in thick layers outside the cabin, like the land had been freshly buried. Ethan stood at the doorway looking at the endless horizon. No sign of visitors, no tracks except his own. Inside, the alien woman still slept on his bed. Her body was curled tight, her breathing shallow but steady. She looked fragile, almost too weak to survive another day. Yet there was something about her that felt unbreakable, as if a hidden strength lived under that frail frame. Ethan brewed his morning drink and watched her. He told himself she was only a guest until she could walk again. But deep down, he knew guests were dangerous on the frontier. Guests brought questions. Guests brought hunters. When she stirred awake, her large silver eyes searched the cabin. She seemed surprised to still be alive. Her voice was weak, but her words came clearer than last night. "You saved me." Ethan gave a short nod. "Couldn't just leave you in the storm." She touched the scarred marks on her arm. The burned symbols glowed faintly under the cabin light. Ethan noticed her hands shake when she did. "I was not meant to live," she whispered. "My people cast me away. I am barren." He studied her. "That's what you said last night." "What does it mean?" Her gaze dropped to the floor. She hesitated, as if afraid to explain. Finally, in broken words, she spoke. "My tribe values only mothers. Women must bring new life. Those who cannot are cursed. We are sent out to die." Her tone carried no anger, only heavy shame. Ethan felt a cold knot in his chest. He had seen cruel customs before. Some human colonies had their own harsh laws. But this was different. This was exile without hope. "You've been living out there alone?" he asked. Her lips curved into something close to a bitter smile. "Alone is death. I wandered 2 days before Storm found me, then I found you." The word sent a shiver through him. "Found him? Not by chance?" Ethan narrowed his eyes. "You say it like you were looking for me." Syrah's gaze lifted to his face. For the first time, he noticed how sharp her eyes could be, almost cutting. She did not answer, but her silence was louder than words. He set his mug down hard. "Listen, you can rest here. But if you're hiding something, I need to know. Out here, secrets get people killed." Syrah held his stare for a long moment. Then she closed her eyes again and leaned back against the pillow, too exhausted to argue. Ethan left her to rest, but unease gnawed at him. He worked outside, checking the solar panels and water tanks, but his mind stayed on the strange woman. The desert was endless, yet somehow she had ended up at his door. He wanted to believe it was chance, but his gut told him otherwise. By evening, he brought her food, plain rations, warmed by the stove. She accepted with a small nod and ate slowly, each bite careful. "You live far from your people," she said softly between mouthfuls. "I like quiet," Ethan replied. She studied him with a tilt of her head. "Or you hide." Her words struck harder than he expected. He almost laughed, but it came out more like a growl. "I don't hide from anyone." Syrah said nothing, but her eyes held the same sharpness again, as if she saw through him. The cabin grew quiet after. Outside, the desert stretched endless and cold under the twin moons. Ethan tried to focus on his book, but he felt her gaze often drifting to him, silent, watchful. Later that night, he woke suddenly. The cabin was dark except for a faint glow. He turned and saw her sitting on the floor near the window, her hands moving slowly in the dust. She was drawing shapes, curves, and lines that twisted together like some secret map. The marks glowed faint blue before fading away. "What are you doing?" Ethan's voice was sharp. She turned, startled. Her silver eyes shone in the dim light. For a moment, she looked like she might lie. Then she whispered, "Remembering." "Remembering what?" She hesitated, then rubbed the shapes away with her palm. It does not matter, but it did matter. Ethan could feel it. He could see it in her trembling hands. Those symbols were not random. They were alive with meaning. Ethan lay awake the rest of the night, listening to the wind outside. He told himself she was just a broken exile, a lost woman cast out by her people. But the truth pressed against him, heavy and sharp. She was more than she seemed. And if she carried secrets into his home, sooner or later, those secrets would bring others to his door. The second night came cold. The desert wind howled against the cabin walls, and the sky was heavy with 2 pale moons. Ethan sat at his table, polishing the old rifle that never left his reach. Across the room, Syrah sat silent, her eyes fixed on the fire. She had eaten, but she hardly spoke. It had been 1 full day since he found her in the storm, 1 full day of questions without answers. She called herself barren, cast out by her tribe. But Ethan's instincts told him there was more. The way she traced hidden symbols in the dust, the way she looked at him as if weighing his soul. It was not the way of a broken exile. The quiet was broken by a sound. At first, Ethan thought it was the wind. But then came 3 soft knocks on the door, not loud, not desperate, precise. He froze, rifle in hand. No one traveled this far, not without reason. His nearest neighbor was days away. He turned to Sira. Her silver eyes were wide, her face pale. She whispered only one word. "They come." The knocks came again. Ethan stepped slowly to the door. Every part of him wanted to leave it closed. But something stronger, the same thing that had made him lift Sira from the storm, forced him to turn the latch. The door opened. 3 figures stood in the cold night. They were women. Like Sira. Their skin bore the same faint glow, their bodies just as thin and frail. Each carried the same scarred brand burned into their flesh, the mark of exile. Dust clung to their hair and clothes, and their eyes were hollow with hunger. For a moment, Ethan only stared. 3 more of them. 3 strangers, all cast out. The first stepped forward, her voice cracked but steady. "We seek shelter." Ethan's grip tightened on the rifle. "How did you find me?" The woman's eyes flicked toward Sira inside the cabin. "She called us." Ethan turned sharply to Sira. She did not move, did not deny it. She only looked at him with that same unreadable gaze. "You brought them here?" His voice was sharp, almost accusing. Sira's lips parted. "If I had not, they would already be dead." The second woman staggered forward, almost collapsing. Ethan caught her by instinct, and her body was weightless, just like Sira's had been. She clung weakly to him, whispering, "Please." He cursed under his breath. This was no coincidence. 1 exile was chance, 4 was something else. Reluctantly, he guided them inside. They huddled near the fire, their eyes closed. Their thin hands stretched toward the heat as if it was the first warmth they had felt in years. Ethan stood by the door, rifle still in hand, watching them with suspicion. His home, once quiet, now held 4 aliens, 4 strangers with scars and secrets. When they had eaten, Ethan finally spoke. "I want answers now, all of you. Why are you here?" "Why my door?" The first woman, the one who had spoken outside, lifted her gaze. "We were left to die, like her. But she told us to come. She told us there was a place of shelter, a human who would not turn us away." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "She told you? When? How?" The woman hesitated. "In the storm. In dreams." The room fell silent. Dreams. Ethan's skin prickled. He looked at Sira. Her face gave nothing away, but he saw the faint movement of her hand against her knee, as if tracing invisible lines. "You're playing a dangerous game," Ethan said. His voice was low, hard. 4 of you, marked the same. You think I won't ask questions? My colony will send patrols if they find out. And trust me, they won't be as kind as me." Sira finally spoke, her tone calm but cold. "If you send us away, we die. And when we die, your peace will die too." Ethan's stomach turned. The words carried weight like a warning from someone who knew the future. The third woman, the youngest, leaned forward. "We have nowhere else, please, just 1 night." Ethan wanted to refuse. Every instinct told him this was trouble. But he also knew what it meant to be abandoned. He had left Earth years ago to escape his own kind of exile. Though not the same as theirs, the feeling was familiar. 1 night, he told himself. Just 1 night. He set down the rifle, but his eyes stayed sharp. "Fine, you stay. But tomorrow you talk. All of you. No more riddles." The women lowered their heads in agreement. But when Ethan turned toward the window, he caught something in the distance. On the far horizon, faint red lights flickered. Not lightning. Not storm. Lights that moved in straight lines, slow and deliberate like searching eyes. Hunters. Ethan's hand tightened on the window frame. He did not speak of what he saw. But deep inside, he knew his cabin was no longer hidden. His life, once quiet, had been broken open, and the storm he had invited in was only beginning. The cabin felt smaller with 4 of them inside. Ethan had built it for 1 man, for a life of quiet, but now it was crowded with strangers. The air was heavy with their low breathing and the faint, strange scent of their skin, like metal touched by rain. They slept close to the fire that night, huddled together as if they had always been one family. Ethan stayed awake in his chair, rifle across his lap. Sleep would not come. His thoughts turned in circles. How had they all arrived here? Why his cabin? Why now? When the first pale light of dawn touched the horizon, Ethan rose and stepped outside. The desert was still. No tracks, no signs of travel. He walked around the cabin, studying the dust. It was strange. 4 women had arrived, yet their steps were faint, almost too faint, as if the storm itself had carried them to his door. He returned inside to find Sira awake, her silver eyes following him. The others still slept, their faces peaceful. Sira sat apart, her hands folded, her posture calm, too calm. "You are troubled," she said softly. Ethan scowled. "Of course I'm troubled. Yesterday I lived alone. Today I have 4 exiles in my home, and none of you are giving me the truth." Sira tilted her head. "What truth do you seek?" "The truth of why you're here," Ethan snapped. "Don't tell me it's chance. Don't tell me it's luck. You brought them. You knew they would come." She did not flinch under his words. Her voice was steady, almost too steady. "They were dying. I called them. That is all." "Called them how?" Silence stretched between them. Her lips moved slightly, then stopped as if the words were locked away. Ethan felt anger stir in him. "You can play your games with the others, but not with me. If you've brought danger here, I need to know." Sira's gaze sharpened, her eyes glinting like steel. "Danger was here before us. You only did not see it." The words unsettled him. He wanted to argue, but the conviction in her tone silenced him. By midday, the others stirred. They ate what little food Ethan gave them. Small pieces of ration bread. They thanked him with quiet voices, though their eyes seemed to watch more than speak. The youngest of them, with pale hair and the smallest scars, sat close to Sira, as if she were a sister. Ethan studied them carefully. He noticed things. The way their movements mirrored each other, almost in rhythm. The way their eyes sometimes shifted to the window at the same moment. They were connected, though he could not see how. When he stepped outside again, he caught sight of the horizon. The red lights he had seen the night before were gone. But he knew what he had seen. Someone or something was searching. That night, as the women whispered among themselves in their strange tongue, Ethan listened. He did not understand their words, but their voices carried both fear and resolve. It was not the sound of helpless exiles. It was the sound of people planning. Finally, he could bear it no longer. He set his rifle down hard on the table. The sound made them fall silent. "I want answers," he said, his voice sharp. "Now, why are you here? What are you hiding?" The first woman who had spoken at the door looked at him. Her eyes were tired, but her voice carried quiet strength. "We are hunted by our own people. They fear what we know. What do you know?" Ethan demanded, her lips pressed together. She glanced at Sira, as if waiting for permission. Sira gave the smallest nod. "We know the old ways," the woman said. "The knowledge before the tribes were broken. The knowledge of seed and rebirth." The words meant little to Ethan, yet the way she spoke them made his skin prickle. Sira leaned forward then, her voice lower, almost a whisper. "Our people fear us because we are not barren. We are something else, something they cannot control." Ethan's chest tightened. "Not barren? Then the exile mark was a lie?" "You lied," he said. Sira shook her head slowly. "We told you what they told us. But truth is deeper. They cast us out not because we are empty, but because we are full." Ethan's mind raced. He could not grasp all of it, but one thing was clear. Whatever secret they carried, it was the reason they were hunted. And by sheltering them, he had tied himself to their fate. The youngest woman's voice broke the silence. "If you send us away, we will die. If you keep us, hunters will come. But if you stand with us—" She hesitated, searching for words. "If you stand with us, the storm will change." The fire flickered. Shadows danced along the cabin walls. Ethan felt the weight of 4 pairs of eyes on him. He did not answer. Not yet. But deep inside, suspicion grew sharper. These women were not helpless. They were not what they seemed. And their presence was no accident. The hunters on the horizon would not be the only threat. The true danger might already be sitting in his home. The night was heavy with silence. 4 alien women lay sleeping by the fire, their breathing slow, their bodies curled together like fallen leaves. Ethan sat awake at his table, staring at the flames, the rifle across his lap. He could not sleep, not after the words they had spoken. They were not barren. They were something more, something feared. He thought about their marks, the branded scars that glowed faintly when the firelight dimmed. He thought about the way their eyes sometimes shifted together, as if they shared one thought. And he thought about the red lights he had seen on the horizon. Hunters were out there, searching. Sometime deep into the night, Ethan heard movement. A soft shuffle, a faint scrape across the wooden floor. He looked up and saw Sira rising quietly, careful not to wake the others. She slipped to the door, opened it, and stepped outside. Ethan's jaw tightened. He waited a moment, then rose and followed, silent as his boots allowed. Outside, the desert air was cold. The twin moons shone high above, silver light spilling across the endless sands. Sira knelt in the dirt just beyond the cabin, her hands moving with slow precision. Ethan crouched behind a rock watching. She was drawing again, lines and curves perfect and steady. Circles connected by straight marks like a map or a code. The symbols glowed faint blue as she traced them, then pulsed once with light before fading into the sand. Ethan's skin prickled. The shapes were not random. They had meaning, power. Finally, he stepped forward. His voice was sharp. "What are you doing?" Sira turned quickly, her silver eyes wide. For a moment, she looked like she might lie again, but then she exhaled slowly and lowered her hands. "You were not meant to see." "I've seen enough," Ethan said. "You've been carving these marks since the first night." "What are they?" She looked back at the glowing lines fading into the dust. Her voice was soft, almost reverent. "They are memory, old memory. The language before time broke." Ethan frowned. "That's not an answer." Sira rose to her feet, her thin frame casting a long shadow in the moonlight. "Our people fear these symbols. They say they bring curse. But the truth is the opposite. They bring seed. They bring rebirth." Ethan stepped closer. "Rebirth of what?" She met his gaze. "Of worlds." The word struck him like a hammer. Worlds. Not children, not families, something far greater. Sira continued, her voice carrying the weight of something ancient. "Long ago, before the tribes divided, before fear ruled, our kind held this knowledge. With it we healed barren soil, brought water to dry stone, gave life where there was only death. But the elders cast it away. They said such power was dangerous, too close to the work of gods." Her hands tightened at her sides. "So they called us barren, though it was not our bodies that were empty. It was their vision, their courage." Ethan's throat felt dry. He looked at the symbols again, still faintly glowing in the dust. "You're saying you can bring life to dead worlds?" Sira nodded once. "Yes, but for this we are hunted. For this we are burned and cast out." Ethan turned away, running a hand through his hair. It was too much, too wild. And yet, he remembered the way the storm lightning had cut the sky in patterns, the same patterns as her marks. He remembered the way the four women seemed bound together like threads of the same cloth. It was not madness. It was truth. He faced her again. "Then why come here? Why me?" Her eyes softened, and for the first time her voice carried something like sorrow. "Because humans still remember choice. Your people still carry fire in their hearts. When we die, our knowledge dies with us. But if we live, if you protect us, it may live again." Ethan felt the desert cold bite through him. He thought of the colony, the strict laws, the endless meetings about survival, rations, and soil studies. They had fought for years to make this frontier world grow crops, but the land always resisted. And now here stood an alien woman saying she could change it with the language of light. It was impossible, and yet he heard movement behind him. He turned to see the youngest of the women standing in the cabin doorway watching them. Her eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight. "You should not tell him everything," she whispered to Sira. "He will not believe." Sira's gaze stayed fixed on Ethan. "He will believe, because he has already seen." The girl's face tightened, but she said nothing more. She slipped back inside. Ethan lowered his rifle. His voice was low, heavy. "If the hunters find you here, they'll kill us all. You understand that?" "Yes," Sira said. "But if they find us, it will not be only us who dies. It will be the chance for your world to live." The desert wind howled across the hills. Ethan stood in silence, his mind torn. He had lived alone for so long, avoiding the weight of other people's wars. Yet now he was caught in the middle of one bigger than he could have imagined. Finally, Sira bent down and swept her hand across the ground, erasing the last of the glowing marks. "Come," she said softly. "It is almost dawn." As they walked back toward the cabin, Ethan glanced once more at the horizon. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw faint red lights moving again, crawling closer through the night. The hunters were coming, and now, Ethan understood why. Dawn broke over the desert in pale light. The sand shimmered like frost beneath the rising sun, but there was no warmth in the air. The land looked empty, quiet, but Ethan knew better. He had seen the red lights. Somewhere out there, hunters were moving closer. Inside the cabin, the women prepared in silence. They ate little, spoke less. Their eyes carried the weight of knowledge Ethan could not yet understand. But he felt it, the tension, the waiting, like the stillness before a storm. Ethan checked his rifle for the 10th time. The weapon was old, but he kept it clean. He loaded the chamber with steady hands, though his mind was far from steady. 4 strangers sat under his roof, strangers with scars and secrets. They claimed they carried knowledge that could save worlds, but their presence had already put his life in danger. He thought of the colony. If they discovered what he was hiding, they would brand him a traitor. Helping exiles was forbidden. Harboring them was worse. The punishment would be exile for him as well, or death. And yet when he looked at the women, he could not see enemies. He saw the fire in their eyes, the way they held each other close, the way they had survived against all odds. Something inside him, something he thought long buried, stirred. He had once believed in building a better world.
He had left Earth because he wanted a chance at something new.
But years of frontier life had beaten that hope into dust. Until now. Now these women spoke of life where there was only death. Sira stood by the window, her silver eyes fixed on the horizon. "They will come today," she said quietly. Ethan's grip on the rifle tightened. "The hunters." She nodded once. "They always follow. They smell fear. They smell knowledge." The youngest of the women, the pale-haired girl, turned toward him. "You should send us away. Save yourself. It is not your fight." Ethan stared at her, then shook his head. "If I send you out there, you won't last an hour. That's not survival. That's execution." The girl's eyes filled with something between sorrow and gratitude. She lowered her gaze. The oldest of them, a woman with deep scars across her arms, spoke for the first time since arriving. Her voice was rough, like stone breaking. "If you stand with us, you choose against your own kind. You will never return to your colony. You will never be safe." Ethan met her eyes. "Safe stopped being an option the moment you knocked on my door." For a long moment, no one spoke. The fire crackled. Dust drifted through the sunlight streaming in the window. Finally, Sira stepped forward. She raised her hand and placed it against the table. Slowly, she traced a symbol in the wood with her fingertip. The mark glowed faint blue, pulsing like a heartbeat. "This is choice," she said. "A seed must be buried before it grows. Buried in darkness, covered in fear. But if it is protected, it rises. If it is abandoned, it rots." Ethan stared at the glowing symbol, then at the women gathered around it. His chest felt heavy. He had never asked to be part of this. He had wanted only silence, only peace, but peace was gone. And now the desert waited for his answer. He turned toward the window again. In the far distance, faint red lights flickered in the morning haze. They were closer now, steady and deliberate. Ships, no doubt. The hunters had found them. Ethan drew a slow breath. His voice was steady, though inside his blood raced. "If I stand with you, if I fight, will it matter? Can you really do what you say? Can you really bring life to this world?" Sira's eyes shone in the dim light. "Yes, but only if we live long enough to plant it." Ethan looked at each of them in turn. 4 women abandoned by their people, hunted for what they knew. They had nothing left but each other. And now somehow they had him. His hand tightened on the rifle. He felt the old fire stir again, the fire of a man who had once believed. "Then we fight," he said. The women's eyes met his. For the first time, he saw something in them other than fear. Hope. The scarred woman gave a slow nod. The youngest smiled faintly, though tears touched her eyes. And Sira placed her hand over the glowing mark on the table, and it flared bright. "Then today," she whispered, "the seed begins." Outside, the horizon burned with red lights. The hunters were coming fast now, their ships cutting through the morning air like blades. Dust rose in thick clouds beneath them. Inside the cabin, Ethan stood tall, his rifle ready. 4 alien women gathered beside him, their hands all ready. Moving with silent precision, tracing invisible lines in the air, the symbols began to glow again, faint but growing brighter. For the first time, Ethan did not feel alone. He felt like a man standing at the edge of something vast, something greater than fear. The choice was made and the storm was about to break. The ground shook before the hunters appeared. Ethan felt it. First, a faint vibration through the wooden floorboards of the cabin, like distant thunder rolling beneath the sand. The women felt it too. They rose together, their silver eyes fixed on the door, their bodies tense. The glow from their hands flickered faint blue against the walls. Then came the sound. Engines. Low, steady, and merciless. The kind of sound that meant no escape. Ethan stepped to the window, rifle in hand. Across the horizon, red lights cut through the morning haze. Dark ships skimmed low over the desert, kicking up waves of dust. They moved in a line, slow and deliberate, like wolves circling prey. "They've found us," Ethan said. His voice was calm, though his chest pounded. Sierra stood beside him, her face calm in a way that unnerved him. "They always find us." The youngest woman trembled but raised her chin. "Then we show them we are not prey." The scarred woman muttered something in her own tongue, rough and sharp, but her eyes burned with fire. Ethan turned back to the room. His cabin was no fortress. Thin walls, a single locked door, one old rifle. It was built for survival, not war. Against hunters it was nothing, and yet when he looked at the women he felt something shift. They were not just victims, not just exiles. Their presence filled the small room with something larger, heavier, like a storm waiting to break. The ships drew closer. Dust rattled the windows. Ethan checked his rifle one last time, knowing it would never be enough. Sierra stepped into the center of the cabin. Her voice was soft but strong. "Tonight, human, you will choose what story your people tell about you." Ethan stared at her, then gave a grim smile. "Guess I always liked the stories where the underdog fights back." The women moved quickly. They formed a circle, hands outstretched, fingers tracing invisible patterns in the air. Blue light sparked, faint at first, then brighter, weaving between them like strands of silk. The marks glowed on their skin, the exile brands burning as if alive. The air hummed. Ethan felt the hairs on his arms rise. Outside, the hunters' ships landed. Dust clouds billowed high, swallowing the horizon. Shapes emerged through the haze. Tall figures in armor, weapons glowing red. Their movements were precise, without fear. These were not men sent to capture. They were men sent to kill. The first knock struck the cabin door. Not gentle. A blow hard enough to rattle the frame. "Open!" a voice thundered, deep and commanding. "By order of the tribes, surrender the outcasts or burn with them." Ethan's grip on the rifle tightened. He looked at the door, then at the women. They did not move, did not flinch. The circle of light between them grew brighter, spreading across the floor in glowing lines. The second blow struck harder. Wood cracked. The door would not last. Ethan's heart pounded. This was it. "The moment, Ethan," Sierra said without turning. Her voice was calm, steady as stone. "Stand with us." Or stand aside. He swallowed hard. All his years of silence, of hiding, of trying to live alone, they meant nothing now. The storm had come to his door, and the choice was his. The third blow splintered the door. Cracks spread across the wood. Ethan raised his rifle. "I'm not standing aside." The women's circle flared. Blue light shot upward, forming a dome of energy that filled the cabin with a glow like sunrise. The hunters outside shouted, their voices muffled by the hum. The door shattered. Figures in red armor burst through, weapons raised. Their eyes glowed like fire, their steps heavy. Ethan fired the first shot, the crack of the rifle echoing like thunder. One hunter fell, another stumbled. Then the women's light surged. Symbols burst across the air, swirling in patterns too complex for Ethan to follow. The walls shook, the floor trembled. The hunters' weapons sparked, their red glow clashing with the women's blue. For a heartbeat, it felt like the whole world held its breath, and then the cabin exploded with light. Blue and red clashed, burning through the small room. Ethan staggered back, half blind. He saw Sierra's eyes glowing like silver fire, her voice rising in a chant older than words. He saw the youngest woman crying out as energy pulsed through her veins. He saw the scarred one raise her hands and the hunters recoil, their armor cracking under invisible weight. Ethan fired again and again, though he knew his bullets were nothing compared to the storm raging around him. The ground split. Sand roared. Outside, the hunters' ships shook as if struck by an unseen quake, and in the heart of it all, Ethan stood with them. Not as an exile, not as a stranger, but as part of something larger than himself, The battle had begun. The outcome was still unknown, but one truth was clear. Nothing would ever be the same. The light grew brighter, swallowing the cabin, swallowing the desert. Ethan's last thought before the world vanished in fire and thunder was Syrah's voice echoing in his mind. The seed begins.